Amy tells him to let go, but it's too late. He's too high to let go now. We follow the Cahills on their next stop to find the ingredients for the serum. They were just in Tunisia, and now they're already on to their next destination. In London, J. Rutherford Pierce and his wife Debbie Ann meet the Queen of England and have tea with her. Apparently, Rutherford has been coming down with the shakes, and this time it happens in front of the paparazzi, and he drops the teacup he's holding. When he leaves, he tries to play it off with a joke, stoking international politics in the US and the UK at the same time. We also learn that Rutherford faked his background. Unsurprising there. He claims to be from a working class background, but actually comes from money.
You're a phony! Hey, this guy's a great big phony!
Meanwhile, Amy Cahill and friends are landing at La Aurora International Airport. They're in Guatemala City on the hunt for the next ingredient for the antidote for the serum. Amy puts on sunglasses, worried they'll be greeted by paparazzi, but all is quiet so far. The gang is on the way to another gate to board a helicopter to get to Tikal, since getting there is difficult by any other means. That's when paparazzi shows up, and they run to hide out in the VIP lounge. There, they run through to another exit and try to hide out in the crowd. That almost immediately fails, and Amy orders they leave the airport to avoid the paparazzi finding out where they're going. But the exit is blocked by Pierce's men, so Dan suggests they ride the luggage carousel. The thugs give chase as the Cahills and Rosenblum disappear behind the wall. They're greeted by angry and confused workers yelling in Spanish as they continue to flee. As they run out onto the tarmac, Pierce's men are gaining on them. The kids jump onto a luggage truck and Amy yells at the pilot to start the chopper. Together, they board and take off, narrowly missing the serum-enhanced goons. As they fly, Amy asks Dan if he noticed anything weird about the pilot, and he says no, mostly because the boys and Amy aren't on friendly terms at the moment. Atticus is poring over Olivia's notebook, examining a section of strange glyphs, as well as a set of letters and numbers. He's been looking at a recipe for rock candy, pointing out how weirdly complicated it is for something so simple. She asks Jake about the recipe ingredients, but is interrupted by a call from Ian. He's just checking to ensure they made it to the transport. She hangs up and Jake describes flakes of a riven crystal chipped off a stone from a Mayan temple. He also says Olivia noticed that the crystal had odd formations under a magnifying glass. Dan says it must be shocked quartz. Atticus mentions that it must have been formed by the meteor that crashed there millions of years ago. But that landed in the Yucatan, and Jake mentions that the Maya traded all over Central America. The book specifies from Tikal, and Atticus goes on to say they built their temples out of limestone, but may have put sacred stones on their altars. That's when Atticus realizes the rock candy recipe is actually a chemical formula for quartz. It's part of the antidote ingredient. Just then, they fly through a cloud of ash and the chopper begins experiencing turbulence. When Amy checks on the pilot, he's strapping a parachute to his back. She alerts the others and they begin trying to subdue him as Amy fights to level out the chopper herself. She struggles to fly as the boys deal with the pilot behind her. Atticus is grabbed by the man as he tries to jump. Dan and Jake doing everything they can to stop the pilot. He kicks Jake in the shin and is able to get free, letting go of Atticus mid-air. Dan barely grabs his foot, but it slips from the shoe, just as Jake reaches down and catches his brother by the torso, holding him up with a surge of strength.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Amy continues to try and fly as Jake helps her contact the Tikal control tower. They're shocked to hear a teenage girl is flying the chopper, but help guide her toward Tikal National Park. They tell her to find a clearing to land in. She finds a clearing in front of a stone structure and begins descending, but when Jake pulls the parking brake 30 feet off the ground, they fall out of the sky. Amy pulls the nose of the chopper up, causing the tail to crash into a stone wall, and everyone braces for impact as the thing comes crashing down. Everyone is a bit banged up, but okay. Amy bit her lip. Dan and Atticus each cope in their own way with jokes and immersing themselves in history around themselves, respectively. Atticus says they landed in a Pocatoc court, a ball game played by the Maya. Military jeeps and an ambulance arrive, paramedics and soldiers stepping out. The captain speaks with them as they're checked over by paramedics. They explain that the pilot jumped and that they're just there as tourists. A park ranger pulls up and the captain asks them to take the kids to their hotel as the military investigates the crash. In the car, the ranger asks if they're the Cahills from the news and they play it off. Atticus tells them about the ball game played by the Maya and how the players were offered as sacrifices to the gods. He mentions that the glyphs of the stone hoop were familiar. They pass through an ancient city full of stone structures. Dan mentions Star Wars filmed some stuff there, and Atticus spots a Cody. They also see a Kaiba tree, these huge trees that were also sacred to the Maya. The ranger mentions that they have an issue with poachers, hunting animals, taking rare plants, or chopping down trees. They're hard to spot due to the dense jungle. They check into their hotel. Amy points out that Dan has a footprint on his shirt. It's from the pilot stepping on him in the helicopter. Then, they see the news talking about J. Rutherford Pierce and his meeting with the Queen of England. When she sees Debbie Ann, Amy realizes that she isn't taking the serum like the others and asks the others what they know about his wife. The news continues to the interview with the couple, and Debbie Ann describes her childhood in a family of scientists. Her surname is what gets Amy's attention. She is a starling. That's how Pierce knew about the serum, the branches, everything. They dial Attleboro and have them look up Deborah Starling. They hang up and an archaeologist arrives, Dr. Casanova. Amy arranged a meeting with her by pulling some strings that reach up to the president of Guatemala. Finally, they're pulling strings with their Cahill connections. Casanova says she's never seen any quartz in her excavations. Amy tells her they have permission to explore the unexcavated ruins. She pulls out the forged documents she had produced, and Dr. Casanova says she'll send a guide with them to ensure they don't harm the historical sites. Then she leaves. The four get dinner in a restaurant and visit the gift shop when Atticus sees a plate with glyphs on it and gets an idea. Together they rush back to the hotel, where he pulls out Olivia's notebook and flips to the page with the glyphs. He says it's connected to the ball game Poketalk. The glyphs show different aspects of the game, like one player holding the ball, another player scoring, and combined with the numbers and letters, which are directions from one player to the next, it all forms a map. Atticus lays it over a map of Tikal, and it lines up with the map he was able to draw. Dan points out that two dots don't match up with any known location. It might be unexplored ruins. They agree to explore more in the morning. At Trilon Labs, Nellie Gomez sneaks down after hours to check on Sammy Murad. When she can't find him, and is at risk of getting caught, she hides in a men's room. She notices a closet and checks it out. She tries several attempts at opening a secret entrance to no avail until she pulls on the hook in the closet. This reveals a secret hallway that leads to a lab with Sammy in it. He explains that he's been stalling for time as best as he can, but doesn't know how much longer he can keep this up. Pierce just demanded that he wants the serum to begin mass production within the next week, before he announces his candidacy. Nellie imagined Pierce's political base, the Patriotists, souped up on the serum and shivers at the thought. When she goes to leave, she hears voices in the hallway, and Sammy has her hide behind a rack of lab coats as he distracts the guards bringing him his food. Nellie can't help but swoon at his courage and wit in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, what's with all the drool?
In Attleboro, Pony isn't coming up with any information on Deborah Starling. He realizes her family history had been wiped from the internet. He is able to find a family photo of the Starlings circa 1975. He notices a girl with binoculars dressed as Jane Goodall. The whole family is dressed as scientists. She is the only person not labeled with a name. He suspects it may be Debbie, but can't be sure. Pony thinks the only person who could have done this was April May. Jonah comes in, encouraging Pony to keep doing whatever he's doing, and high-fives him. This means a lot to Pony because he's never worked with a team before, and he's really enjoying it. In Tikal, the gang is trekking through the jungle following Olivia Cahill's map. You know, I just thought about it, but are these kids getting properly vaccinated as they're traveling the globe? They rarely travel commercially, so who would know? Anyway, it's hot, there's mosquitoes, and Atticus is giving the group the rundown on the area and how it succumbed to drought and eventually famine. When Amy questions Atticus, he shows her a glyph that left him stumped as they rest in one of the ruins out of the sun. After some more traveling, they stumble upon a hidden entrance marked by a laughing monkey. They search the vine-covered temple but come up empty. Atticus is sure the unknown glyph is what's leading them astray, and Amy reassures him they'll study the book tonight. With how smart Ad is, it's easy to forget he's just a kid, the youngest of them all. They begin hiking back to their hotel when Dan gets suspicious and tells everyone to freeze. When they do, they hear the sounds of someone following them when out of the bush bursts Pierce's men. Amy yells for everyone to run as the men try to ambush them.
Oh, why do I have to run every 8 minutes of my life?
They're quickly surrounded and break into action. Amy gets grabbed by two goons, while Jake evades and attacks another. Then you have Atticus and Dan crawling away under some brush. When one of Amy's captors pulls a gun, she kicks it out of his hand. The gunman goes after the weapon as Jake attacks the other thug. Together, the two crawl after Dan and Atticus. They spot a zipline platform and climb up to it. They grab the conveniently placed harnesses as their pursuers are slowed down because they can follow them up the stairs and instead are forced to climb. As the gang zips away, Pierce's men are hot on their tail, using their gloved hands to zipline after them. They make it to the next platform, but they're out of zipline and are forced to cross a wooded suspension bridge over a gorge. Then, they make it to another zipline over a rushing river, with Dan reminding Amy that it leads to the zipline center. Atticus and Jake make it across without issue, but when Dan begins riding down the line, a new guy appears on the far shore and begins hacking at the zipline. He cuts one, which causes the remaining rope to leave him dangling over the gorge. Amy wants to rush after him, but feels powerless to do so. That's when she gets the idea. The only way to help Dan is to be able to move and think as quickly as possible. So she reaches into her backpack, grabs the vial inside, and chugs the serum.
Are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind?
With a surge of newfound power, she hauls herself up along the zip line and reaches Dan in seconds. She catches him as the final rope is cut, and they swing back towards Pierce's men, knocking them out. Amy orders Dan to get on her back and climbs down the cliff to the edge of the river. Together, the two navigate the slippery rocks to the other side of the river. She then hoists Dan onto her back again and begins climbing the other cliff face. She leaves him to fend off the machete-wielding goon, and with Dan by her side, they run to the zipline center. They run into Jake and Atticus, and when Dan questions her about what happened, he realizes she took the serum. Amy tells Jake and Atticus the truth, and that because of her actions, she will be the most powerful person in the world for 1 week, and then she will die.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
You see, Amy took the full force serum straight to the face, not a diluted form of it daily like Pierce is doing. It's like how you're not supposed to take all your meds at once to make them work faster, more or less. On the way back to the hotel, Dan is inconsolable, bawling his eyes out thinking about how he will lose the only person he has left in this world. Back at the hotel, Amy is brimming with new energy. She can barely stay still, like a child on a sugar rush. Jake tells her to focus. They need to find the ingredients for the antidote. It's way more serious to them now. Atticus asks where the book is, and they ask Dan, who is carrying it in his back pocket. But he can't find it, and he's even more distraught at the idea that this is all his fault. That Amy only has a week left, and he just lost their one way to save her. Off the coast of Maine somewhere, Kara Pierce has just went around beating up her brother, Jolt. She changes and heads downstairs for Round Table, a quiz game where their father has them compete against one another. Kara pulls ahead in the score Pierce keeps for his children.
I hate you so much.
Because of her good performance, she gets to go with Pierce to Washington instead of Jolt, but then makes a comment towards Kara that implies Jolt is still favored even if she is doing well for now. She vows to show Pierce her worth. Debbie Ann checks in on Kara, telling her about how she'll need new dresses. Kara tells her just to order them online. In her study, Debbie Ann is revealed to be spying on her husband lately to figure out what he's hiding from her in her own home. She just hopes he doesn't find out. Otherwise, he won't hesitate to hurt her. Back in Guatemala, the Cahills are in the car having just looked through the jungle for the journal. It was no use. They couldn't find it. When Atticus asks Amy about the crystal, she is lost in thought and suggests it looks like the panels of a man's face. They're interrupted by a spider monkey knocking on the window, startling them. When Amy scolds Dan out of nowhere, the others are worried about her. Then she gets a phone call, which she connects to the laptop to video chat. Do we have this tech that works that way? If not, the Ekaterinas sure are handy. Nellie tells them that Debbie Ann is Deborah Starling. She is a Cahill. April May wiped any proof of her existence from the internet. The kids catch her up on what they've been through, including Amy taking the serum. Nellie is reassuring her that they'll find the antidote ingredient. Amy gets distracted by Atticus with the glyph. From a distance, it resembles a mirror, and that causes Atticus to have a brain blast moment.
Brain blast!
In Washington, D.C., Pierce is giving a speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial to a crowd of supporters. He talks about American exceptionalism, and Kara is shocked at how bold he is in his words. She worries who would be president when he's in office, the charmer or the real J. Rutherford Pierce. They finish their tour of the monument and enjoy dinner at the Capitol. As he jokes around with some senators, Kara notices a tic developing with his constant winking. He even kicks a senator by mistake. He's losing control as he nears full serum power. In Tikal, Atticus has led the group south of the Mundo Perdido, the Lost World, one of the oldest sections of ruins. He shows that the Mural de los Jugadores, the mural of the players. It shows a ball game between the hero twins and the lords of the underworld. The lords are on the damaged side of the mural, but Atticus says one of them was the Lord of Mirrors. He thinks it's code for opposite, like a mirror image. He has to draw the map flipped over. As Amy paces thinking, she has a moment of symptoms from the serum. It stops everyone staring at her. She tells them she's fine and comes to a realization they can get rid of Pierce's men by trapping them in a deep hole they can't climb out of. The others are concerned because what she's describing is killing Pierce's men. When she comes to this conclusion, she is horrified at her train of thought. In Delaware, Nellie's lab is assigned a top-secret project to find a cure for the Cahill serum symptoms of involuntary movements. Nellie is currently being bothered in her office by one of her assistants, Dr. Beckelheimer. She dismisses him and tries to focus on the report she has to write up. She's learned of another symptom causing yellow vision. She is considering writing about how they could sell that as an added bonus when she leaves for the day. Beckelheimer is still studying as she does so. The next day, she is called in to see Dr. Stevens, who demands to know what the paper is all about. Beckelheimer went behind her back and printed out her unfinished report. She is able to convince the Stevens to give her till lunch to prove Beckelheimer is untrustworthy and has Pony dig up some dirt on the gnome lover. He does, and by lunch, Beckelheimer is being escorted from the building. Later, Stevens congratulates her and promotes her to Vice President of Biochemical Research.
She's an icon.
In Guatemala, Amy is up pacing in the hotel. She hasn't been able to sleep, and Jake walks in to ask her to try and rest. She agrees and wakes up thinking there is a jaguar in the room and fights it off, only for Dan and Atticus to come in to her attacking Jake.
Jesus Christ.
She's terrified of how her mind and body are playing tricks on her and speaks with Dan alone. She needs him to take charge of the mission, and he agrees without hesitation. Poor kid.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Back in Delaware, Nellie uses a microscopic laser to carve a secret message on a glass slide and sneaks downstairs to give it to Sammy. However, he's now being protected by an armed guard around the clock, so she tries using a vent to sneak in, but hears something and runs up to the stairs again. She hides until the person is heard exiting the stairwell and rushes back down and slips into the air vent, knocking down a fire extinguisher in the process. She stays quiet as the guards check it out and then leaves. Nellie finds Sammy and waits until he leaves for the night to leave the message behind, hoping he can help with Amy's symptoms. In Tikal, Amy gets an email telling her they found a book of hers and want her to bring $5,000 to a rendezvous point. There's no name and they don't recognize the email. It's a trap, and Dan shows them on a map that the location is an illegal logging camp.
That's suspicious.
Dan says they need help and makes a decision to call Ian for backup.
Call in everyone.
He fills Attleboro in on what happened and tells them to meet them with the money and to bring Hamilton, Jonah, and Pony. They'll meet them that night and hang up. Dan says they need to split up, with one team going after the crystal and the other going for the book. Amy and Dan will bring the ransom, and the rest will go find the crystal. Jake tries to change their minds, but Dan is firm in his decisions.
Say that's my baby, and I'm real proud.
Off the coast of Maine, Pierce is speaking to the chief of his current henchmen, Marrow. They were fed some of the serum to make them stronger. Pierce is upset with them for allowing the Cahills to get away in Guatemala. Here, we also learn that the previous henchmen that ate the slow-acting poison in the previous book had died because they failed their mission.
You're a monster!
To appease Pierce, Marrow hands over Olivia Cahill's book, and from it, Pierce immediately pieces together the Cahill's plans. For something that's supposed to be a closely guarded secret, it sure is easy for anyone outside the family to crack this code. I get his juiced up on serum, but still, I expected better from Olivia. However, he also theorizes that from the book, maybe he can find a way to stabilize the serum. At Trilon Labs, Nellie is given access to level 3 classified files and forwards them to Pony, who sends her level 1 access codes. Nellie thinks how she'd rather be rushing to help the kids, but she is helping from there. She calls Fisk, hoping he can provide anything on the serum, but the nurse answers saying he's in physical therapy. She doesn't believe it, and he leaves immediately. In Tikal, Jonah, Pony, Hamilton, and Ian arrived and met the others. They agree to split up. Jonah, Ham, Ian, Jake, and Atticus to search for the crystal. Pony stays behind as communications director, and Amy and Dan meet the blackmailers. At the Calendar Institute in New York, Nellie enters Fisk's room, and he flinches as she enters. Then she tries talking to him, but he's hallucinating and she realizes he's been given the serum as a test subject. She tries checking him out, but Dr. Calendar is in on it and she leaves in frustration. When she gets back to Trilon Labs, she finds an email of a recipe. It's a coded message from Sammy. She decodes it and learns Pierce has changed plans and wants him working on combining the antidote with the serum, making him impossible to cure. Nellie comes to the conclusion that Pierce has Olivia Cahill's notebook and realizes she must tell Amy and Dan. In Guatemala, Jonah, Jake, Atticus, Ian, and Hamilton are navigating through the jungle at night, avoiding park rangers. They find the temple and wander inside to look for the crystal. Jake finds the glyph of the Lord of Mirrors and they move faster, searching. They find and scrape off an ounce before quickly making their exit. With Pony, he gets a call from the boys telling him that they got the Riven Crystal and are heading back but are lying low near the ransom location coincidentally. Pony emails April May, telling her he thinks she's cool and stuff. She replies to watch out for more danger. Then, he gets a text from Nellie, telling him about the book. Pony realizes there's only one thing to do, run. Which, like, why? Why not call the boys back? That way you have more boots on the ground.
Well, I am confusion.
At Trilon Labs, Nellie tries helping Sammy escape through the vents, but they're instantly caught and detained by guards who take them to a room to lock them in. I'm surprised Nellie isn't brought back to being held hostage by the Vespers at this point.
You're busted.
With Dan and Amy, they're attempting to make the drop when Pony comes into the clearing, yelling for them to stop that there is no book. They try to run, but henchmen burst out of nearby tents and surround them. Together they turn and climb up a plant-covered pyramid to avoid them, with Amy fighting off the thugs herself to give Pony and Dan time to reach the top. While the henchmen are distracted, the boys slide down on a vine and hide. When she fights off the rest and goes to find them, they're restrained by 2 more goons. Amy fights them off too, and together they run, but the 12 attackers catch up and Amy tries to fight them off when a bout of hallucinations comes over her and distracts her long enough for Dan and Pony to be grabbed again and taken toward a chopper. The men leave Pony and take Dan as Amy runs to catch up, but Pony is closer and grabs the landing gear of the chopper as it takes off. Amy tells him to let go, but it's too late. He's too high to let go now. Amy watches helplessly as it flies over the canopy when one hand slips, and then the other, and then Pony is falling into the jungle, and all is quiet after. Amy runs into the jungle, only to find his lifeless body. Pony is gone.
No, God!
Wow, what an ending. I did not see that coming, but I should have in hindsight. Poor Pony. He was just starting to get the way of things and come into his own. And Nellie and Sammy, how are they going to get out of their situation? Especially without their tech guy to help them out now. At least the others have the crystal, but they still have 4 more ingredients to find and only 1 more book. How are they going to accomplish this? I'm not sure. And can they save Dan before it's too late? Most likely. All that and more will be revealed in the final book in this series, Flashpoint. See you all in the next one. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye!
Bye!